Hey guys, welcome back to Money for Lunch. We're going to have just an excellent show. We have a new contributor joining us today, Kevin Heupel. Kevin Heupel is a bankruptcy debt relief expert, and I think that you're going to find his information timely and useful. Let me tell you a little bit about Kevin. Kevin is a best-selling author, an attorney who has been featured in USA Today's Legal Elite and has helped thousands of good people just like you get out of debt. In March, Kevin recently became a best-selling author on Amazon with his book, Get Off the Financial Roller Coaster. Today we're going to be talking about your options for eliminating debt and getting a fresh financial and emotional start with our latest contributor, Kevin Heupel. Kevin, welcome to Money for Lunch.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. You know what? It's an amazing thing. You know, we're just kind of getting out of this recession, and some of us are still dealing with it, and people are reeling with just tons of debt, and they're upside down on their homes, and their 401's out of whack, and let me ask you this. Let me start off with this. Real simple. When does someone know if they're having a debt problem?
Well, there's always a couple of ways. And I always start with the obvious ways. And the obvious ways that you're having a debt problem is that you're missing payments, credit card, mortgage, car payments. You're getting collection calls. You're being sued by collectors. Your wages are being garnished. Your bank account's being garnished. So that's always the obvious signs of a debt problem. But sometimes people won't accept that. But if you do have those things going on, you just have to know that is a debt problem, because if you were paying the bills, nobody would be harassing you about it. Now, the not-so-obvious ones are, when you get those credit card statements, and when you look in the right corner there, it shows you if you make your minimum payment, it's going to take you 20 years to pay it off. But if you triple the payment, you might be able to pay it off in 7 or 9 years. What we always look at is if you can't pay that debt off in 5 years, if you can't increase your payments to pay it off within 5 years, then that's a sign of a debt problem. And the reason why is because you can file a bankruptcy and pay all your debts off in a 5-year period, and whatever you can't pay off, you can eliminate. So you have a legal right to get out of debt that you can't afford to pay within 5 years. So that's one thing we look at. The other thing we look at is the amount of unsecured debt that you have to your gross income. And if your unsecured debt, like a credit card, a student loan, a medical bill, a line of credit, is more than 20% of your gross income, you're going to struggle to repay that debt. And as it goes up, you're actually not going to be able to repay it at all. And these amount of debts can be pretty high quickly. If you think that if somebody's making $30,000 a year, if they have credit card debt more than $6,000, they're not going to be able to repay it. It's just too much debt to the income to repay, because you need money to pay for things like rent, car payments, gas, groceries, and insurance. It's okay to have those things. It's just when you have debt above 20%, the debt's now competing against those things. And so people either will cut back on the necessities of life, like groceries, in order to make a credit card payment, or eventually it gets so high that that's when they start missing the payments, and they kind of realize, oh yeah, now I got the debt problem. But if they would have looked at it sooner, then they could have taken different steps to solve the problem.
Right. You know what? And I'm going to add my 2 cents in here. I think that from listening to what you just said, if you're missing, if you're getting a couple of calls and maybe you're late on payments, that might be a debt problem. I think that if they're garnishing your wages and you're getting threats in the mail and possible lawsuits, demand letter type stuff, I would treat that as a debt emergency. You better take action, otherwise your life is seriously going to go down the crapper.
No, absolutely. Because once you get sued, in most states, the creditor is allowed to garnish your wages, and they can garnish up to 25% of your wages. So if you're in a position where you weren't able to pay the debt to where they're suing you, you can't afford to lose 25% of your wages to pay the debt. And the problem is the debt that they sue you for is always going to be higher than the original amount because there's going to be interest that accumulated, there's going to be attorney fees that get added on, and so it always gets worse by the time you get to the point where you're being sued and garnished.
Right, and let's talk about this. You know, there's this emotional component that can really, cause a lot of issues too. In your book, you talk about the emotional challenges that people face when they are struggling with debt. In your opinion, with all your experience, what do you see as the biggest challenge they face?
It's fear. It's fear of not knowing what happens if you don't pay the debt, and then it changes to fear of what happens when what the collectors can do to you. Collection companies are notorious for using some underhanded tactics to get you emotionally upset so that you'll pay, and that will put somebody into fear, and so they worry. They're afraid of what happens if they don't comply with the collection companies. And then, you know, what's ironic is there's actually a big fear about the solutions out there. You know, There's a fear of what happens if I do credit counseling, or what happens if I settle the debt, or what's the fear of bankruptcy, because they don't have all the information, but they're feeling the emotions of being in the debt, and now the emotions of trying to get out of it. And there's all kinds of emotions that come in. There's the fear of failure. There's also the fear that, you know, it's not going to get better, but yet they have this fanciful hope that it is going to get better, that, oh, if I just win the lottery, this problem will go away. And so what happens is the emotions just kind of make them paralyzed. And as a result, what I find is that most people who have debt, they don't do anything about it for probably a couple of years when it first hits. And I think it just kind of takes a while to awaken from the slumber. And what I found with my clients is just the fear overtook them. And they became so afraid that basically they shut down and they did nothing.
Right. You know what? And fear has the ability to do that. Stops you in your tracks. And, you know, I think that the other fear that people deal with is what are people going to say about me? Who's going to find out? If I file bankruptcy, if I get this debt counseling, if I go, if I call Kevin Heupel, who's going to know? You know, my neighbor's going to look at me funny because they're going to know that I'm getting this help, which is, first of all, not true. And second of all, really, who cares? You need help. Just get it. And, back to, what we started to talk about in the very beginning, another symptom of a debt problem, if you're having tough time sleeping, if you're constantly worrying about it, that might be a debt problem. Kill it before it becomes a debt emergency. And it's amazing to me, this thing that we as humans have, this fear where, we're afraid that we can't pay our bills, but we're afraid of the solution. We're afraid of what other people are going to say. We're afraid that we're going to lose everything, but yet we do nothing. And it's just amazing as humans how we are able to do this on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. Fear has competing interests, and then they all feel equally the same. So like what you said, you get to the point where like, well, they're all the same. There's nothing I can do, so I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
And eventually something happens that will propel you to do it, whether you're talking to a friend who says, oh, have you ever looked at bankruptcy, or you're getting garnished, you're losing your home to foreclosure, you see an ad on TV, and then all of a sudden the mind wakes up one day. It's like, oh, yeah, boy, we got to do something here. Because, now it's gone beyond fear. Now it's about livelihood. It's about survival.
Let's talk about this real quick. What kind of solutions are available for someone who is struggling to pay their bills?
The most popular three solutions out there are credit counseling, debt settlement, and bankruptcy. And they all kind of work differently, and it really depends on somebody's income, assets, and type of debts. Like credit counseling is when you take all your credit cards and you get them on a repayment plan within 5 years at a lower interest rate than what the current cards are. So if your only debt's credit cards and you got a pretty good income, it's a great solution for that. If you have other types of debts, then it's going to fall short. It's not going to solve it. Debt settlement is where you settle for pennies on the dollar. And you hear the stories. Well, I was able to settle my $100,000 debt for $20,000. And that can certainly happen. And you can do that with a variety of debts. You can do it with credit cards. You can do it with medical bills. You can even do it with private student loans. The kicker is that you need to go into default on these debts. They need to be sold to a collection company because that's where the profit's made. Let's say you have a credit card at Chase, and it's a $50,000 card, and you haven't paid it. Chase will sell it to a collection company, and they might get 10 grand for it. And
Right.
Chase will just take the 40,000 and write it off as a loss, is how they go about it. Well, now the collection company's in at 10. So for the collection company to make money, they just need to settle it for something above $10,000. And that's why you hear that, yeah, they'll take $15,000. And especially they'll take it quick because now they made a $5,000 profit within a week. I mean, that's a good rate of return. And so that's how collection companies look at it, and that's why you can settle the debts with them. The kicker is you need the $15,000 cash. You got to have the money. The collection company is not going to take payments over 5 years to get the $15,000. If they're going to take payments, they're going to want the entire $50,000, which they're entitled to do. And I think that's kind of one of those myths out there that people think, well, I'll settle it for 15 and I'll just make payments on it, and you can't do that. And another thing that people need to realize with debt settlement is you do pay a tax on what you settle. With my example, if you have the $50,000 debt, you settle it for 15, you are going to pay taxes on the $35,000.
Wow. So the 35,000 are looked as what, income?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's looked as income, ordinary income, so you just add it to your line and it gets taxed at ordinary personal income tax rates. So, you know,
Wow.
if you're in a lower income bracket, that's maybe not such a bad thing, but if you're a high income earner, yeah, you know, that the amount of that debt to settle it has just gotten higher because you're going to have to pay taxes on it. And,
Well,
you know,
this brings me to my next question. Then, out of those scenarios, generally, what solution works the best for eliminating debt?
well, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It's always going to depend on the person's income, their assets, and the type of debts that they have. Because the other solution out there is bankruptcy, and that will get rid of most debts. It gets rid of everything except child support, alimony, and student loans. So if you don't have those debts, then bankruptcy can work well. But it depends on what kind of assets you have for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy allows you to protect many things. You can have equity in a home. You can have equity in cars. 100% of your retirement's protected if you file bankruptcy. But let's say you have a paid-off rental property. Well, if you file bankruptcy, you're going to lose that rental property. So in that situation, bankruptcy may not make sense, where you might get a loan on your rental property and use those proceeds to do debt settlement and settle the debt and pay the taxes. So that's why there's just never a one solution fits all, because everybody's situation is just going to vary. And so when people are out there struggling with debt, the best thing to do is, you know, look at attorneys who understand these different things. You know, if you're struggling with debt, don't call a debt settlement company hoping that they're going to provide the solution. What they're going to do is they're just going to give you debt settlement as a solution. And the same applies to attorneys. I mean, don't just call a bankruptcy attorney and say, well, yeah, I need to get out of the debt, because his or her solution is going to be bankruptcy. You know, call an attorney that knows about all of them, that's willing to do them all, and that way you can get just a straight advice and a clear answer on what is going to be the best solution for you.
Yeah, you know what, and I love the fact that, you know, you're discussing all these three solutions, because it's interesting to me how this debt game works, for lack of better terms. You know, you mentioned the fact that, you know, if you owe this money to Chase, they may sell it for pennies on the dollar. Now you negotiate your deal with the collection agency. What's interesting about this, if anybody's ever dealt with, you know, bank or big creditors, you know, what boggles my mind, Kevin, is why wouldn't the bank just work out a deal with you to begin with? You know, why wouldn't they just come and say, listen, you know, we're going to sell this for 10 cents on the dollar, but if you're willing to work a deal with me, I'll work out a deal with you for 15 cents on the dollar. I don't know why Chase and all these big creditors don't just do that with their own, you know, with their own people, their own debtors. It just doesn't make sense to me. But that is the way the game works. It goes from the, you know, from the original creditor to whoever buys the debt, and you know, and and this thing can go on forever. And you mentioned something else that's so true, that you have these people that are really kind of scummy, for lack of better terms. They really are on the other side of collection laws and fair what is it? The Fair
Act.
Thank you. The Fair Debt Collection Act. You know, they will use these mob-like tactics. They will lie to you. They will do all sorts of things to upset you, as you mentioned. And if you don't get off your butt and just get a consultation of some sort, talk to somebody and find out what your rights are, you're really going to pay the price, not only financially, but emotionally.
Oh, yeah. The emotional part's the worst thing about it. You know, and to your question earlier, why don't the banks settle? Well, a couple of reasons why. One, the banks made money on you already. What I find with my clients who do end up filing bankruptcy is that whatever they bought on that credit card, they paid it off 2 to 3 times over. They just haven't paid off the balance because the interest rate's 16-20%. So they're chasing the compound interest rate. That's why they can't pay it off. But Chase has made money. I mean, whatever was bought has been paid for 2 to 3 times. And then the benefit to Chase is that once they do sell the debt off, now they can take a loss. And it's kind of a fake loss because they already made the money. So what they do is now they're able to take a loss to lower their taxable income. I mean, banks are profitable.
Right, yeah.
They know how
if anybody knows about money.
Yeah, the bank always wins. They're like the casino. The house wins, the bank wins. And so to them, you know, it's just a numbers game that works out to their advantage because they made the profit, and now they get to take this tax deduction. And, you know, they build it into their system. They know that 1 to 2% of credit cards are going to get wiped out through a bankruptcy, and they just add it as an expense like anything else that they would have, whether it's office supplies, computers, payrolls, you know, you name it.
Right. Hey, Kevin, we're out of time, but great information, great strategies there for people who are suffering from debt.